Is it almost midnight and I've decided to film this now? Yes. Hello everyone, it's Patri and I'm here with a video. I am here to recommend and talk about all the literary fiction books I've read so far this year. I haven't filmed a wrap-up this year. I think I filmed a winter wrap-up, but that really was 2020 based, not really 2021 based. So instead of filming one video where I talk about all the books I've read so far, I decided to break it up into genres, and this one is literary fiction. I'm going to be touching upon some points such as what happened in the book. Was it a compelling plot? Did I like or dislike the characters? Did I care? Was I sucked in or was it hard to get into? How did it make me feel? Was it believable? And of course, would I recommend it? So the main point of this video is to help you guys kind of decide and narrow down what books you're actually going to want to read and if they're worth it. If you've been on the fence, keep on watching to know if you should read these. So the first book I'm going to be talking about, I listened to an audiobook, and it's Dominicana by Angie Cruz. In Dominicana, we're following 15-year-old Ana Cancion, who is married off to a guy twice her age, and they're Dominican, hence the name, and she moves to New York with him. The family sees this as an opportunity to grow and eventually be able to move the rest of the family to the States. So we're following her in this marriage as she feels very lonely. Like I said, moving into the States where she doesn't speak English. She's 15. She's married to a guy twice her age. So we get to see a lot of her struggles with that and how she starts making friendships, some of which she can trust and some of which she can't. Mainly, it's, I would say, a character study because we're really focusing on Anna. We're not really seeing much more of anyone else. It's a lot of like her everyday life, following her routine, following her abusive relationship, just following the hardships that come with moving from the Dominican Republic, the Caribbean, to the States as someone very young with no educational background in English and having left everything she ever knew. I think the plot itself was very compelling when it came to reading the synopsis, and I was very excited to pick it up. But overall, I think the book did disappoint a little bit. I think halfway through it starts focusing on another romance that I did not feel was very believable, and that kind of made me lose a little bit of interest. I felt like there were a lot of themes and subjects that the author could have dove deeper into. The book did provoke certain emotions in me though, and I feel like that should be like given, it should be given credit for doing that. I felt very disgusted at the relationship she was having with her husband, and I did feel for Anna. I felt for the situation she was in, and like I just can't imagine being 15, leaving everything behind and marrying someone so much older that you don't love. But like I said, I felt like they could have explored that more, and she just kind of kept on living, which I guess is what you're supposed to do in a situation like that. Like, what else can you do but keep on living? And do I recommend? I'd say I would recommend this book if this is exactly what you're looking for, and by that I mean a not so in-depth and depressing book of the hardships women in the Caribbean and overall in Latin America had to go through while moving to the States back in the 50s. I think this takes place in 60s, sorry, in the 1965. So yeah, I guess I would recommend. I don't think I would pick it up again, and I don't think it's for you if you were expecting something like I was expecting more of a revelation and just more of a conversation of what is really going on in the story. But yeah, so I would recommend, I guess, and I ended up giving it 3 stars. Next up, I'm going to talk about On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong, and this has been on my channel a couple times, I believe. This is Ocean Vuong's debut novel. He is originally a poet. This book is kind of a autobiography, but not, you know, it's the son, which is Ocean, writing a letter to his mom, who is illiterate and can't read in English. So he's kind of going through a lot of the trauma he went through as a kid, having been raised by two women who suffered from PTSD from the Vietnam War. So we're we're following him growing up with this, as well as him discovering his sexuality, and of course going through a lot of the hardships having moved from the war brings, and the poverty that comes with that. I think the plot itself was very, very compelling, but a pattern you will notice throughout these books is that it hits kind of like a point halfway through or towards the end where I start to feel a little disappointed because it's not exactly where I wanted the story to go or where I was expecting it to go. And mainly this is because I want more out of it, not because I'm disliking what's happening. So I want to make that distinction clear, and that was the case with this book. I was really, really into it the first half, and then after the first half it kind of started slowing down a little bit, and I was still very interested. I read this in like 2 days, but I would say it definitely left me feeling with a feeling of wanting more. It focuses more on his relationship on the second half with this guy he ends up meeting, and forms a very beautiful friendship, but eventually a very sad and toxic friendship. And I really enjoyed that, but I wanted to know more about the grandma and the mom and everything they were going through. So that was kind of my, I don't want to say problem with it, because at the end of the day I wasn't too bothered by it to dislike the book. I just wanted more. I think 100 pages more would have done the book really good. It loosens its grip it has on the reader it had at the beginning. Hopefully that makes sense. But overall, a very, very beautiful book. I wanted a little bit more, and because of this I ended up giving it 4 stars. Do I recommend it? Yes, I recommend it. I think it's a very good read to learn a little bit more about someone's experience being raised, like I said, and a family that is impacted by the war in Vietnam and is carrying this war with them while the world has managed to move on. Next, I want to talk about The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I always say Coelho and I think it's Coelho, so sorry Paulo. I have the book, but I'm too lazy to get it. I very much so enjoyed this book. I'm sure you know what it's about, but if you don't know, we're following a shepherd, I think that's the word, a shepherd go on this journey to find a treasure. Yes, that's the story. Yeah, he's trying to find a treasure, but overall throughout the book we're learning the gift of patience and waiting for things to come to you and putting in the work to receive something good in the end. So that's kind of the overall outlook of the book. I thought the plot was very compelling. I actually listened to this one and it was very, very nice to listen to. It was just relaxing. I feel like maybe if I had read it I would have thought it a little too predictable, but it's a classic, so that happens. And overall it was just very, very good. Yeah, I was pretty sucked into the story. And would I recommend? Of course I would recommend. I feel like everyone needs to read this. It's a classic, and I did feel like maybe I didn't learn something new, but it definitely reminded me of things I had learned already in the past that you just don't necessarily think about on the everyday, during your everyday life. There we go. You know, just like being patient and putting in the work and just, you know, accomplishing your goals. Yes. So I gave this one 4 stars. And then on that same note, right after this, I wanted to read more Paulo Coelho, but the only book that was available in the library at the library that time, and I listened to this as well, was The Archer. And oh my god, I really, really dislike this. This is another one where you're kind of like having to learn an overall story. It's super short. I think the audiobook was like 4 hours total, and I listened to it in like 2 hours. It felt very redundant. I thought it was trying a little too hard, so I found it hard to listen to. I did not think it was compelling at all. I did not care for the characters, and I would not recommend, honestly. Just, it's not even worth it. If you're gonna listen to it to like hate on it, I guess. That sounds so awful, but it's just not good. I of course still want to read more of his books. I don't really count that one as a actual one of his books. I think it's the newest one that's come out, and I gave it 1 star. I would have given it 0, but yeah, I gave it 1 star. Then I read Writers and Lovers by Lily King, and I had actually read Euphoria by Lily King once. Yes, I have been left with very similar feelings after reading both. In this book, we're following the main character, whose name is Cassie. And she is a frustrated writer. She is trying to write a novel, but while she is writing this novel, her mother passes away very unexpectedly due to a tragic accident, and her life, as you can predict, kind of falls apart. She isn't really making it with writing, and she's working at a restaurant who treats her very poorly, and she hasn't had very good experiences with men. She is getting out of a relationship with this one guy, and then she meets another guy, and then we kind of follow her trying to decide who she wants to be with and stuff. Overall, I enjoyed the listening experience, and like I said earlier, a lot of these books have the same pattern. I was enjoying it at the beginning a lot, but then throughout the second half, it just kind of lost my interest a little bit, because it was good. I did care for her as a character to an extent. I can't say I cared that much for the male protagonists, because we don't really get to see them as much. And it was a little bit repetitive in a lot of her writer's block, and the events that were happening at work, and the events that were happening with the men in her life. So it was kind of like a repetitive cycle until she finally realized what she had to do. But overall, it was very enjoyable, and I would recommend it if you're looking for one of those types of books where you're following a woman whose life is falling apart and she falls in love with someone. Yes, with a more literary aspect to it, if you might say. So yeah, also this cover is stunning, sorry, and I love it. Like, I really love the cover. I also love the cover of Euphoria. So Lily King is doing very good with her covers. I end up rating this as a 3.75, so a little higher than a 3 stars, but not fully a 4 stars. Now this book, Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. Oh lordy, I could say so much about this, but since we're talking about so many different books, let's try to keep it brief. What happens in this book? What does happen? Now this book, Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. I could say so much, but let's try to keep it concise. So what happens in this book? In this book, we're following a family who rents an Airbnb that's kind of a beach house, but not really at the beach. They're renting the Airbnb for the weekend because they want to get away. They have a lot of monetary problems. Like, they're comfortable, but they're definitely not rich. So they're kind of playing pretend in this Airbnb. But during the first night there, the owners of the Airbnb come by and tell them that the entire city is experiencing a power out. Is that what you would call it? Like, the power went out. And things are weird. They didn't really have anywhere else to go, so they came back to their house. And then weird things start to happen. Like, they start getting breaking news messages that they can't really understand. There is no signal anywhere. They can't get in contact with anyone. So this whole book has a very ominous, is that the word I'm looking for? Ominous, that's the word. There's an ominous atmosphere to it. You just have like a feeling of dread, but you never really know what's going on. There are racial tensions, as the family that is staying there is white and the owners are black, so there are racial assumptions. and I think it does have a lot of potential commentary. I just don't think it executed the commentary very well. I think there's a lot of themes regarding climate change, because kind of what we're seeing is that this is a perhaps natural disaster that could happen. Sorry, I heard a noise. Literally, I'm creeping myself out while talking about this book. There are multiple possibilities, like, is it a military thing? Is it a climate change thing? So it's left very open-ended, and I think that's one of my problems, and I don't mind an open-ended ending where you have to kind of wonder, but I felt like it rambled so much and spent so much time on certain descriptions. Like, there's like 3 pages worth of what was in her grocery cart, and I guess that's to represent how they're quick to spend money on vacation. So yeah, there's a lot of commentary here. I just don't think it was executed properly, and I don't think it went in depth as it should have, as it should have. Oh my god. Yeah, I'm gonna say that about a lot of the books, but this one I very strongly feel that way. This is a shorter book. I love the cover. I was so excited for it, and I just felt like I didn't really read much. I ended up rating this 2.5, and I rounded up to 3 stars because I felt like the writing itself was very good, so it did deserve that. And would I recommend it? I've heard some people really like it. I personally would not necessarily recommend it. So yeah, take what you will, I guess. I don't think it's that groundbreaking. I'm sure there's other books that provoke similar feelings and emotions and do it a little bit better. The next book I'm going to be talking about is The Final Revival of Opal and Nev by Donnie Walton. Why is this book so hard for me to describe? This book has been compared to Daisy Jones and the Six because it's told in interview format, although I will say there is a lot more of a story being told, I'd say. So the person who is interviewing Opal and Nev, who are 2 very famous singers from the 80s, but not famous in that they lasted for a long time and they really made it big. Famous in that a tragic event made them famous. In this tragic event, Opal's lover is involved, and Opal's lover, Jimmy, is the interviewer's father. There we go. So the daughter of Jimmy, who dated Opal, is interviewing Opal and Nev to really capture what happened during those years and what was the story being told. I'm trying to keep it vague so I don't spoil it, because I think that's kind of the charm of the book. And this explores a lot of racial tensions in early 70s. Just blatant racism that Opal had to deal with. I did care a lot for the characters, and I did think the story was very compelling. This was such a fun read. It was very fun. It was not perfect. Like I said earlier, it just kind of lost me towards the end. It was very easy to get into it, not hard at all. I don't know if I would have enjoyed it as much if I had been reading it physically, because it is interview format. I would definitely recommend this book. You can tell that I was like being way more descriptive and way more enthusiastic about the books, and now that it's like 30 minutes into filming this video, I'm kind of dying out a little bit. But that's what happens when you decide to start filming at midnight. So whatever, we're just gonna deal with it, aren't we? Then I read Milk Fed by Melissa Broder. In this book, y'all, oh my god, I had such high hopes. It started off so strong, but we're basically following the main character who suffers from an eating disorder. So definitely a lot of trigger warnings regarding that. And I thought that part of the book was the most compelling and the most relatable. I think a lot of girls deal with the way the character explains viewing her body. I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel like the main character captures very well, I guess the author captures very well at the beginning, how women are raised in society and how they're made to think about their bodies and how they're made to calorie count and stuff like that. So I thought that was such a good, strong start, and I was so excited. She eventually meets this girl who works at a yogurt shop, and they start to form a friendship. But the other girl, I'm blanking on both their names, so sorry. The other girl eats a lot, and that's how she shows a friendship, I'd say. Like, she'll make something for her, and the main character is struggling with an eating disorder. So throughout the book, her relationship with food changes, but I don't think it's done in the healthiest way. I also don't like how the focus of the book switches from following this character dealing with a lot of her struggles to this complete overly sexualized lesbian relationship where the woman that she meets is literally just an object. I feel like she started having a personality and then she just never developed it. She kind of stayed pretty constant, and I feel like the main character was literally just using her for her body and just using her as an escape from her own struggles. And like, I think she put a lot on her, and I don't think she respected her at all. So the girl she meets, they're both Jewish, but the girl she meets is a lot more religious, and her family is not okay with gay relationships. And the main character just basically outs the girl, and like, oh, I'm kind of spoiling it, but yeah, sorry. I could not deal with the main character. I really disliked her. And like, the book just had so much potential. I feel like the book describes very well human emotions, human anxiety, human feelings, and like what we think. At least I thought so. Like, I feel like I could very clearly see what the main character was thinking. But that's to the extent of depth we see. Like, the other character had none, and it was very very because I liked the other characters so much more. And I liked how their relationship started. Like, I thought it was like cute and flirty, but then just became so overly sexualized, and she just objectified the other woman so much, and it just made me sad because I felt like she didn't actually love her for who she was. She only loved that she would lose control around her, if that makes sense. That's my little rant. So no, I don't recommend this book at all. I don't think it portrays a healthy relationship at all. And I guess it kind of acknowledges that, but not enough for me to like forget it. I ended up giving Milk Fed 1 star, and on this I wish I could have given it 0 star, but I wanted the rating to go down, so sorry not sorry. Then I read Anxious People by Frederick Backman, and this is my second Frederick Backman. And this one we're following a robber hostage situation, and we get to see how all their lives have collided in the past before, and how the hostages form a friendship. I'm not saying much more than that because it's really good to just not understand what's going on so that it all just like fits together and makes sense. I genuinely loved all the characters here. I felt like they were so human. Maybe a little exaggerated on some aspects, but exaggerated in a humorous way. And like, this was so good. I really loved this. I listened to this book as well, and it was a wonderful listening experience. There was one character whose voice, if I remember correctly, was a little annoying, but not anything where it's like you can't listen to it. It's just like, oh god. I was completely sucked into it. I listened to it in a day, and it's like a pretty long book. So this was incredible. It made me feel so happy. It made me feel grateful for the friendships I have in life, and it made me want to be a good friend. This is just such a wholesome book, and like, there's good life lessons to learn in this. It's not necessarily very believable, but it's like, I love it. I really liked it. Would I recommend this? Yes, I would recommend this 100%. This is like such a fun book. I think it's like it reminds me of spring. I think it's like a springy book. and that's when I read it. I think that's probably why it reminds me of spring. If you're looking for something to make you happy, this is it. I gave this 5 stars. I think this is the only 5 stars we have in this video. Then I read Taina by Ernesto Quiñones, and this is in Spanish. The author is Puerto Rican, so I support it. Of course, I'm Puerto Rican, if you didn't know. I think there are translated versions though. So, in this one we're following a Puerto Rican teen who lives in New York, and he becomes a little obsessed with this woman, but it's not too creepy of an obsession as I thought it was going to be. It's more an infatuation and like having just a very intense crush. But she gets pregnant, and that her name is Taina. Taina is pregnant, but she claims that she didn't have any sex. Her and her mom claim that she's a virgin, and he believes her and he tries to defend her. And so from then we follow him trying to form a friendship and eventually a relationship with Taina and the mom, and another character who makes himself present. I'm not gonna spoil too much. This blends magical realism with a little philosophy, I'd say, and it was overall a pretty good book. It's like a coming of age story. I'd say it reminds me a little bit of Catcher in the Rye, but not as corny. Not as corny. I cared for the characters, mainly the guy. I wish we had been able to learn more about him and see more of him, not as focused on Taina, you know, like getting to know him as a character and not just him as a character in love with Taina. But I guess that's the whole point of the story, right? I was really sucked into it, and I didn't want to put it down while I was reading it. I read this one physically. Like a lot of them, again, the ending just left me wanting a little more, but to this book's advantage, it has like a magical realism aspect to it, so I'm able to forgive it and accept it as that, because with magical realism, that's kind of what you get, right? Yeah. So how did it make me feel? It made me feel really weird in certain parts. It made me feel like, whoa, what? Like question things, and it just made me think. But yes, I would totally recommend this. Go support this Puerto Rican author. I definitely want to read more of his work, and I think this cover is stunning. So yeah, do I recommend? Yes. I ended up giving it like a 4.75, and I rounded up to 5 stars. So I guess 2 books, 2 5-star reads, I guess, kinda. Not really, not fully, you know. Next book I'm going to be talking about is A Wild Sheep Chase by Haruki Murakami. This I also enjoyed so very much. So very much. This was my first Murakami. We're following our unnamed main character who works for an advertisement company, and he ends up using a photo of sheep for an advertisement. And this starts off a sequence of events which entices him to search for one of the sheep with a star on its back that is featured on the advertisement. From there, we see him travel throughout rural Japan and go through, I'd say, self-discovery. I don't know if self-discovery is the word. A self-study, maybe. Self-study journey in which he's trying to track this down while also learning about a lot of things going on around him in his personal life and blah 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 blah. Yeah, it was really good. Again, I'm trying to keep it brief and not go too in depth, but yes, it did have a very compelling plot. I could not put it down. I just wanted to know what the heck was happening, because I at least did not see it. This has magical realism aspects to it as well. I noticed the I'm blanking on the word, but you know when someone just like gives up a lot, like he would give up in everything in his life, and that was very frustrating. But it didn't really make me dislike him. It made me just like feel for him and want to shake him a little bit. So that's kind of what I have to say about the character. But overall, I'd say we don't become too close to it, because to him, because he has no name, and we don't really get to see a lot of his own personal life outside of what's happening. I guess we do get to see his personal life, but just not in too much detail, just kind of like being told things are happening. I don't know. It's a cool book. It made me feel confused. It made me feel thoughtful, and I would highly recommend this. I've heard this is Murakami's least liked book, so I am very excited to read more of his other books because I enjoyed this, so I would recommend it, and I gave it 4 stars. The next book I'm going to be talking about is Hot Stew by Fiona Mosley, I believe that's her name. In this one, we're following multiple people of different social classes in different environments. So one is a prostitute, one is a very, very rich real estate woman, and then we're also following kind of like an ex-convict who's done a lot of horrible things in the past but is trying to become a better person now. We're following an actor who is friend with him, and we're following a man who comes from a very wealthy family but is very tired of a lot of the hypocrisy and fakeness of the world he lives in. I think that pretty much captures the different people we're following. Oh, and then we're following a woman called Debbie McGee, I think that's her name, who lives on the streets and goes on a journey to rediscover herself. So basically we're following all of these different actors and their lives kind of cross paths with each other, and it all takes place in central London in Soho. And yeah, I don't know, like I don't know how to describe what really happens in this book without telling you exactly what happens in this book. So just know that, as the title says, a hot stew, like it's a melting pot of a bunch of different people, and I think it's meant to show you that the diversity and how so many different people can live in such a tiny space, leading such different lives. And it has a lot of commentary on social economic classes. So yes, I was sucked into the story. It made me feel, I felt very attached to a lot of the characters, and even if I didn't necessarily love them all, I wanted to know about their story, and I did sympathize with most of them. And I really wish this book had been a little bit longer, just so we could see what happens a little more. As I've said all video, like I just really did want to see more though. I feel like we build up to kind of the ending of the story throughout the entire book, and then it happens and then it ends. So I wish we had been able to see the aftermath for longer and how their lives were impacted by what happened. But yeah, that is all I am saying. Would I recommend this? I would very highly recommend it. I gave it 4 stars. Then the next book I read was Sharks in the Time of Saviors by Kauai Strong Washburn. I think so. I can't read my own writing right now, so I think that's the name. I'll write it here if I said it wrong. But in this one, we're following 3 siblings, and I think it shows a lot of the competitive dynamics between siblings when one sibling is clearly gifted and kind of preferred by the parents, you know, or just like, yeah, preferred, honestly. They live in Hawaii and they're very poor, but one day they're blessed when the son falls out of a boat and the sharks come and bring him back. That is said to be the gods having blessed him. Kai, I think was his name. So from then on, we're following the family who believes they've been blessed. We see them grow up and lead very different lives, and the blessing that they thought they received isn't necessarily like that much of a blessing. Like they kind of fall apart because they put so much on this blessing, if that makes sense. Like they fail to focus on everything else in their lives. So they end up moving to the States and end up in different areas of the country and leading very drastically different lives. And that is all I'm going to say because I'm kind of just rambling at this point. I didn't love all the characters. I didn't particularly dislike them or love them. I just kind of felt a little indifferent about them, which I'd say it's my biggest critique of the book. I feel like it didn't do that good of a job at making me attached to the actual characters. It did a very good job at setting the mood, I'd say, and describing what was going on in their lives. But the characters themselves, I just did not feel very attached to, which is where I think the novel lacked. And I think the novel used a lot of explanations as a crutch instead of actually showing us the things that were happening. So I felt a little frustrated, and I did want more out of it. I'm not gonna lie. I wanted more. I wanted more because the entire book they're telling us that this kid is like the new Jesus, basically, and it's gonna be amazing. And then everything kind of breaks away from that, and it's never really retouched. Like, kinda, but not really enough to where I felt satisfied. I'm rambling, guys. I'm wrapping up this video because I'm rambling. But do I recommend this? I think I would recommend it. It's still a very interesting story, and I did definitely like a lot of the cultural insight into Native Hawaiians and the effects that they felt with tourism and a lot of people from the States coming over. So I thought that commentary was really good. Like I said, I just wanted more. So I would recommend it. It's definitely still worth the read because you do get to take something away from it. So yeah, and then I ended up giving it 3 stars. And that is the end of this very long video. I hope you guys stayed till the end. Let me know if you decide to read any of these because of this video, and comment down below, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and all that. I hope you have a wonderful day. Goodbye. Mwah.